This is 3 Creepypasta horror stories. If you like my content, then feel free to give this video a thumbs up and possibly subscribe to my channel for future videos like this one. Now my friends, let's make you a part of a scary story. And if you make it to the end of the video, I'll show you a picture of my TV.
Monsta Creepypasta.
In the quiet suburb of New Haven, Connecticut during the 1980s, the Thompson family moved into a charming old colonial house. It seemed perfect for them, a place to build memories. But beneath its quaint exterior lay a dark secret that would turn one of their worlds upside down. Charlie Thompson was 12, with an adventurous spirit and an ever-curious mind. His little sister Abby was 7, with an imagination that seemed to know no bounds. They shared a close bond, spending their days playing in the yard with Rick, their loyal German shepherd. Life was idyllic, or so they thought. It began with Abby. She would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, claiming that the monster was visiting her room. She described it as a big, scary troll with glowing yellow eyes and long claws. Their parents dismissed it as a nightmare, but Abby was insistent. "Charlie, it's real. It comes from the basement," she whispered one night, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Charlie was skeptical. He was 12 after all, too old for monster stories. But something about Abby's fear made him pause. She wasn't the type to make things up, and her terror felt genuine. One night, driven by a mix of curiosity and a desire to prove Abby wrong, Charlie decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight and Rick by his side, he descended into the basement. The air was damp and cold, filled with the musty smell of old wood. Rick growled low in his throat as they reached the bottom of the stairs. The flashlight beam danced across the cluttered basement, illuminating old furniture, boxes, and shadows that seemed to shift on their own. Then, from the darkness, something emerged. The creature was everything Abby had described and more. It was horrifying, with matted greasy hair, glowing yellow eyes, and sharp teeth. Its long clawed fingers clawed the air as it retched for Charlie. Charlie froze in terror, but Rick sprang into action, barking fiercely. The creature snarled back, and for a moment, the basement was filled with the sounds of battle. But as quickly as it appeared, the creature retreated into the shadows, vanishing into the darkness. Charlie grabbed Rick and bolted up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind them. His heart pounded in his chest, and for the first time, he believed Abby. From that night on, Charlie took it upon himself to protect his family. Every night after his parents went to bed, he would stay awake, flashlight in hand, guarding the basement door. Rick was always by his side, a silent sentinel against the darkness. The creature, the Trautwege as Charlie came to call it, was relentless. It would rattle the basement door, scratch at the walls, and emit low animalistic growls. Each night was a battle to keep it confined. Charlie couldn't tell his parents. They would never believe him. This was his burden, his secret war against the monster. One night, when his parents and Abby were out visiting relatives, Charlie decided it was time to end this once and for all. He had been researching ways to fight monsters, sneaking into the library to find old texts and folklore. He had learned about the power of holy water and decided it was worth a shot. Armed with a small vial of holy water, his flashlight, and Rick, Charlie descended into the basement one final time. The Trautwege was waiting, its yellow eyes glowing with malevolence. As it lunged, Charlie threw the holy water at it. The effect was immediate. The creature let out an ear-piercing screech as the water burned its flesh, smoke rising from the sizzling contact. It thrashed and writhed, but the holy water continued to sear it. Charlie pressed on, splashing more holy water onto the creature until it collapsed into a heap of smoldering ash. The basement then fell silent, the oppressive darkness lifting. Charlie sealed the basement door and cleaned up the remnants of the battle. When his parents and Abby returned, they found him sitting on the couch, Rick at his feet, as if nothing had happened. Abby never saw the monster again, and the house felt lighter, free from the dark presence that had haunted it. Charlie had never told his parents about the Trautwege. It was a secret he kept, a tale of courage and darkness that he would carry on with him for the rest of his life. And though the creature was gone, Charlie never forgot the lesson he learned, that sometimes the monsters in the dark are real, and it takes courage, wit, and a loyal friend to defeat them. It was the fall of 1994 when David Grayson first moved into his small, secluded house on the outskirts of Westfield, Connecticut. The house was modest, a single-story home with wide windows that overlooked the dense forest behind it. The air was crisp there, the trees a mix of fiery reds and oranges, and for the first few weeks, David found the solitude he craved after leaving the chaos of city life. The peace, however, did not last. It started subtly, as these things often do. One night, David awoke to a strange noise. It wasn't the usual creaks and groans of an old house settling in the night. This sound was different, a faint, distant laughter that seemed to drift in from the woods. He dismissed it as a trick of the wind or perhaps an owl hooting in the night. But the next evening, the laughter returned. This time, it was closer, more distinct. David, now curious and slightly unnerved, peered out of his bedroom window. The moon cast long shadows across the forest floor, but there was nothing unusual to see. Shaking his head, he returned to bed, convincing himself it was just his imagination. Several nights later, David awoke again, this time to a chilling hyena-like laughter that seemed to echo right outside his window. His heart pounded as he sat up, the sound loud enough to be heard even with the window shut. He crept to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peek out. Standing just beyond the tree line was a figure, a man, tall and thin, wearing a dark red sweater, blue jeans, and a pair of brown shoes. His posture was unnaturally still, his head tilted slightly as if listening to some unheard tune. And then David saw something that made him just about faint from fear. The man's neck began to stretch, elongating as his body remained perfectly still. The long neck extended towards the house, the man's face slowly coming into view. His eyes were dark and hollow, his mouth stretched into a wide grin. Blood dripped from his lips as he held what looked like a small, lifeless animal in his hands. He took a bite, his laughter rising in pitch, chilling David to his core. David stumbled back from the window, his mind racing. He locked the doors, double-checked the windows, and sat awake until dawn, clutching a baseball bat in his trembling hands. The sightings continued over the following weeks. Every few nights, the man would appear, always in the same dark red sweater and blue jeans, his brown shoes standing oddly pristine in the muddy forest floor. Sometimes he would simply stand there, his neck stretching and twisting unnaturally. Other times, he would feast on small animals, the blood staining his face and clothes. David began to feel trapped, his once peaceful home now a prison of terror. He tried to tell a few friends in town, but they laughed it off, calling it a case of cabin fever. Even the local sheriff gave him a sympathetic smile and advised him to get some rest. One night, the laughter was louder than ever, resonating through the house like a sinister orchestra. David couldn't take it anymore. Armed with a baseball bat and a flashlight, he decided to confront the man. He stormed outside, his breath visible in the cold night air. The man stood at the edge of the forest, his neck already elongating, watching David with those hollow eyes. As David approached, the man's laughter grew louder, more maniacal. His long neck twisted and bent in impossible angles, his grin never fading. "Who are you? What do you want?" David shouted, his voice cracking with fear and frustration. The man's only response was more laughter, his neck retracting slightly before stretching out again. He dropped the remains of the animal he had been eating and took a step forward. David froze, his grip tightening on the bat. The man's neck snapped back into place with a sickening crack, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then, without warning, the man turned and disappeared into the woods, his laughter fading into the distance. David never saw the man again after that night, but the fear remained. He couldn't shake the image of that long, stretching neck and the blood-stained grin. He moved out of the house shortly after, leaving Westfield behind. The locals continued to tell stories about the strange man who haunted the woods, calling him the Launchand, an ancient word for the stretcher, or the weirdo. Some claimed he was a ghost, others a creature from the dark, forgotten corners of the world. But David knew the truth. The man was real, and his sinister laughter still echoes in his nightmares, a chilling reminder of the terror that lurked just beyond the trees. The summer of 2000 in rural Maine was marked by long, lazy days and nights that seemed to carry an undercurrent of something unseen. Greystone, a small town surrounded by dense forests, was the kind of place where life moved slowly, and stories of strange happenings were rumored to be true. But some stories, the ones that linger, are rooted in truth. It was late August when 4 friends, Jack, Emily, Sam, and Rachel, decided to take a long way home after spending an evening at Jack's house. The old country road was filled with moonlight, its edges dissolving into the shadows of the thick woods. They walked in comfortable silence, the night air cool against their skin. But as they rounded a bend, an unsettling sight greeted them. A lone figure standing at the side of the road, half shrouded in darkness. The figure was an old woman, her form frail, her clothing that of a black dress. She seemed out of place, almost as if she had materialized from the shadows themselves. The teens slowed their pace, their curiosity piqued, but their instincts screaming for caution. The old woman turned to face them, her eyes gleaming in the pale moonlight. Her face was deeply lined, her mouth curled into an unsettlingly wide smile. "Hello, children. I seem to have lost my way. Would you be so kind to help an old woman find her way home?" she said, her voice soft and sweet. The group hesitated, the weight of her gaze pressing down on them. Something about her seemed off, but they couldn't quite place it. The old woman's smile widened, revealing teeth that were too sharp and too white. "I promise, it won't take long," she continued, her tone honeyed and inviting. The teens felt an inexplicable pull, a compulsion to follow her, but the unease grew stronger, like a storm gathering in the distance. Without warning, the old woman's frailty seemed to dissolve. She straightened, her hunched posture snapping upright with an audible crack. Her eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and her smile stretched impossibly wide. Before anyone could react, she lunged at Sam, her bony fingers gripping his arm with unnatural strength. The others could only watch in horror as Sam was dragged off the road and into the shadows of the forest. His screams echoed briefly before fading into the oppressive silence of the woods. The remaining 3 broke into a run, their breath ragged, their hearts pounding in their chests. The old woman's laughter, a twisted, unnerving sound, followed them, floating on the night air like an evil lullaby. As they sprinted down the road, the woods seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing longer and darker. After reappearing, the woman didn't run after the teens. She floated, her feet never touching the ground, her shawl billowing around her like dark wings. Her laughter echoed from every direction, a sinister giggle that scared the teens even more. Jack led them off the road and into the forest, the thick underbrush tearing at their clothes and skin. The trees loomed overhead, their branches blocking out the moonlight. The forest was alive with the sounds of their panic flight, but the woman's presence was a constant, oppressive force. They stumbled into a small clearing, collapsing to the ground in exhaustion. The forest around them was silent now, the oppressive laughter gone. The air was thick with the scent of pine and the faint, metallic tang of fear. They huddled together, their breathing coming in shallow gasps, ears straining for any sound of pursuit, but the woods remained still, as if holding its breath. Sam was never seen again. The authorities searched the woods, combing every inch, but no trace of him was ever found. The old woman remained a ghost, a specter that haunted the edges of their memories. The town whispered of the Well-Siri, the witch who lured unsuspecting victims into the woods, never to be seen again. The remaining teens carried the weight of that night with them, a silent reminder of the darkness that lurks in the spaces between light and shadow. And on quiet nights, if you listen closely, you might still hear her laughter ringing out through the woods, a horrifying reminder of the terror that might be out there within our world.